Sit in the back, Natalie. This is for real family. Those were the words my sister Veronica hissed at me as she physically pushed me toward the folding chairs in the corner of Grandpa Sterling's lawyer's office. It was 2:17 p.m. on a gray Tuesday afternoon in downtown Ashmont, and I was being shoved aside at my own grandfather's while reading like I was a stranger who'd wandered in off the street. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I didn't fight back. I didn't make a scene. I just quietly took the seat she'd assigned me, the one furthest from the mahogany desk where the lawyer sat, the one that made it clear I didn't belong. My hands rested in my lap, calm and still, even as my heart recognized what I'd known for years but never said out loud. To them, I had never been family. I had been the help. By the time the lawyer, a silver-haired man named Douglas Pemberton, adjusted his reading glasses and opened the leather portfolio in front of him, I had already accepted that I would get nothing. That whatever Grandpa had left behind would go to Veronica, to our mother Colleen, to our Uncle Gerald, to anyone but me. After all, that's what the last 5 years had taught me. I was useful when they needed something, invisible when they didn't. But 23 minutes later, when Mr. Pemberton slid a certified check across his desk with my full name printed on it, Natalie Ruth Calloway, and the amount $4,900,000 written in bold black ink, the sound of my sister's designer handbag hitting the marble floor echoed through the room like a gunshot. She didn't just drop it. She collapsed into the chair behind her, mouth open, face drained of color, eyes locked on that check like it had just murdered her future. And in a way, I suppose it had. There must be a mistake, my mother said, her voice shaking but sharp. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the polished floor. Douglas, this can't be right. Natalie wasn't, she's not. She's not what? Mr. Pemberton asked calmly, looking over the rim of his glasses. Not Sterling Calloway's granddaughter? Because according to his will, executed 14 months ago and updated as recently as 6 weeks before his passing, she is the primary beneficiary of his liquid estate. Uncle Gerald, who had been leaning against the bookshelf with the smug confidence of a man who thought he was about to inherit a fortune, straightened immediately. Liquid estate? What does that mean? What about the properties? The accounts? Mr. Pemberton didn't flinch. The properties, Mr. Calloway, were sold 8 months ago. The proceeds, along with his investment portfolio, were consolidated. Ms. Natalie Calloway receives the full sum, minus estate taxes, which have already been settled. Veronica finally found her voice. It came out strangled, desperate. That's almost $5 million. You're saying he gave her $5 million and left us nothing? Not nothing, Mr. Pemberton corrected. He slid 3 smaller envelopes across the desk. Mrs. Colleen Calloway, you receive a vintage brooch valued at approximately $2,000. Miss Veronica Calloway, you receive your grandfather's collection of first edition novels, valued at around $8,000. Mr. Gerald Calloway, you receive his pocket watch. The silence that followed wasn't just quiet. It was suffocating. Veronica stood so fast her chair tipped backward. This is insane. He was confused. He was old, he didn't know what he was doing, Mr. Calloway was of sound mind, Mr. Pemberton interrupted, his tone professional but firm. He worked with a geriatric psychiatrist to ensure full mental competency before finalizing this document. There were witnesses. Everything was done according to state law. This will is ironclad. My mother turned to me, and for the first time in years, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't disappointment or dismissal. It was panic. Pure, unfiltered panic. Natalie, she said, her voice softening in that manipulative way I'd learned to recognize as a child. Sweetheart, surely you understand this isn't what Grandpa would have wanted. He loved all of us. He wouldn't want you to take everything and leave your own family with scraps. I looked at her. Really looked at her. The same woman who had told me 3 years ago that I should be grateful for what little I get, when I asked why Veronica got a new car for her birthday while I got a $50 gift card. The same woman who had stopped inviting me to holiday dinners after I refused to co-sign a loan for Veronica's failed boutique. The same woman who, just last month, had told me not to come to Grandpa's funeral reception because it's only for close family. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I picked up the check. The paper was crisp, heavy, real. Actually, I said quietly, standing up and slipping the check into my purse, I think this is exactly what Grandpa wanted. Veronica lunged forward. You can't just take that and leave. We'll contest this. We'll fight it. You don't deserve. Deserve? I turned to face her fully for the first time since she'd shoved me into that back corner. You want to talk about what people deserve? She froze. Because I remember every Sunday I spent at Grandpa's house for the last 5 years, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Every meal I cooked. Every time I drove him to his doctor's appointments because none of you could be bothered. Every night I sat with him when he couldn't sleep because he missed Grandma and felt alone. My mother opened her mouth to protest, but I wasn't finished. I remember every single birthday party, holiday dinner, and family event you excluded me from. Every time you told me I wasn't needed, wasn't important, wasn't really part of this family unless you needed something from me. I walked toward the door, and for the first time in my entire life, no one tried to stop me. They just stood there, frozen in their shock and fury and disbelief. Mr. Pemberton cleared his throat gently. Miss Calloway, before you go, your grandfather left you one more thing. He held out a sealed envelope. My name was written on it in Grandpa's shaky but unmistakable handwriting. I took it, nodded my thanks, and walked out of that office into the gray afternoon light. Behind me, I could hear Veronica's voice rising into a shriek, my mother's frantic questions, Uncle Gerald's furious cursing. But I didn't look back. I got into my car, locked the doors, and sat there for a moment in complete silence. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper. Grandpa's handwriting, dated 2 months before he died. Natalie, you were the only one who saw me as a person, not a bank account. You were the only one who stayed when staying wasn't convenient. This isn't charity. This is what you've already earned. Don't let them take it from you. Don't let them make you feel guilty for being loved. You deserved better than them. Now go live like it. Grandpa Sterling. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and put the car in drive. They thought they'd shoved me out of the will reading. What they'd actually done was shove me straight into the life I was always meant to have. And I was never looking back. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not to the cramped studio apartment in Riverside Commons where the walls were thin enough to hear every argument from the neighbors, where my phone would inevitably ring with their rage. Instead, I drove 40 minutes north to Millbrook Heights and checked into the Grandview Hotel, a place I'd passed 1,000 times but never thought I could afford. The room cost $340 for the night. I paid with my debit card without hesitation. The number in my checking account hadn't changed yet, the $4.9 million was still being processed, but something inside me already had. I wasn't the woman who calculated every purchase down to the dollar anymore. I wasn't the woman who said yes when I meant no just to keep the peace. I ordered room service. Salmon, roasted vegetables, a slice of chocolate cake, and a glass of wine I couldn't pronounce. It arrived on a cart with actual cloth napkins, and when the server left, I sat by the window overlooking the city lights and ate slowly, deliberately, tasting every bite. For the first time in 5 years, I didn't check my phone every 3 minutes. And that's when the flood started. By 9:47 p.m., I had 54 missed calls. Veronica, 31. My mother, 18. Uncle Gerald, 5, even my second cousin Lydia, who I hadn't heard from in 3 years, had tried twice. There were texts too, dozens of them, each one more frantic than the last. Veronica, 6:34 p.m., pick up your phone right now. Veronica, 6:41 p.m., you can't just walk away like this. We need to talk. Veronica, 7:02 p.m., I know you're seeing these. Don't ignore me. Mom, 7:15 p.m., Natalie, this is cruel. Your sister is devastated. Call me. Uncle Gerald, 7:58 p.m., we're getting lawyers. Don't think you've won. Veronica, 8:23 p.m., you're really going to destroy this family over money? After everything we've done for you? I read them all. Every single one. Then I poured another glass of wine and didn't respond to any of them. The voicemails were worse. Or better, depending on how you looked at it. My mother's voice, tight and controlled, Natalie, I don't know what you think you're proving, but this is unacceptable. Your grandfather was not in his right mind. Everyone knows that. You're taking advantage of a sick old man, and frankly, I'm ashamed. Call me back so we can handle this like adults. Veronica's voice, shaking with barely contained hysteria, do you have any idea what you've done? I have bills, Natalie. I have a life. You can't just take everything and act like we don't exist. Grandpa loved me. He told me I was his favorite. This doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense. You need to fix this. Now. Uncle Gerald, blunt and aggressive, you think you're smart, don't you? You think you can just waltz in there and take what's ours? We built relationships with him. We were there. You showed up at the end and played nurse to manipulate him. We will fight this. And we will win. I saved every single voicemail. Not because I needed proof. Mr. Pemberton had made it clear the will was airtight. I saved them because I wanted to remember this moment. The moment they revealed exactly who they were when they thought I'd taken something they believed belonged to them. The truth was, I hadn't taken anything. Grandpa had given it freely. But to them, that distinction didn't matter. Around 10:30 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize. Local area code. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Miss Calloway? A woman's voice, professional and calm. Yes? This is Rhonda Keating. I'm an attorney with Harmon and Lyle. Your mother, Colleen Calloway, has retained our services to contest your grandfather's will. I'm calling as a courtesy to inform you that we'll be filing a petition with the probate court by the end of the week. I took a slow breath. On what grounds? Undue influence and lack of testamentary capacity. Her tone was measured, almost bored, like she'd made this exact call 100 times before. We believe Sterling Calloway was not of sound mind when he drafted his most recent will, and that you may have manipulated him during a vulnerable period of his life. He had a psychiatric evaluation, I said calmly. It's in the file. We're aware. We believe it was insufficient. I see. I swirled the wine in my glass. And you're calling me why, exactly? To give you an opportunity to settle this quietly. Legal battles are expensive and public. If you're willing to negotiate a fair distribution of the estate, we can avoid a great deal of unpleasantness for everyone involved. There it was. The opening move. The attempt to scare me into giving back what was mine. Ms. Keating, I said slowly, I appreciate the courtesy call. But I'm not interested in negotiating. The will is legal. It was executed properly. And I'm not giving back a single dollar. There was a pause. Ms. Calloway, I would strongly advise you to reconsider. This kind of litigation can drag on for years. It can be very draining, emotionally and financially. Then I guess my family should have thought about that before they decided to fight. I set my glass down. If you want to file, file. I'll be ready. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were steady. My heart wasn't racing. If anything, I felt a strange, quiet satisfaction settling into my chest. They were doing exactly what I expected them to do. And I had already prepared for it. Because here's what they didn't know, 3 weeks ago, before Grandpa died, he'd called me to his house one last time. We'd sat in his den, the same room where I'd read to him on countless Sunday afternoons, and he'd told me everything. "They're going to fight this, Natalie," he'd said, his voice weak but clear. "Your mother, your sister, Gerald, all of them. The moment they realize what I've done, they'll come after you with everything they have." "I know," I'd told him. He'd smiled faintly. "Good. Then you won't be surprised." He'd handed me a business card. "This is my attorney, Douglas Pemberton. But this," he'd pulled out another card, "this is who you call when they try to take it away." The name on the card read, Simone Cartwright, Estate Litigation Specialist, Brennan and Ford LLP. I'd tucked it into my wallet that day and hoped I'd never need it. Now, sitting in that hotel room with 54 missed calls and a lawsuit threat hanging over my head, I pulled out that card and sent a single email. Subject, retained for estate defense. "Ms. Cartwright, my name is Natalie Calloway. My family is contesting my grandfather's will. I'd like to retain your services immediately. Please let me know your availability." I hit send at 10:52 p.m. By 11:07 p.m., I had a response. "Ms. Calloway, I've been expecting your email. Your grandfather briefed me on this situation months ago and retained me on your behalf. Everything is already in motion. We'll speak first thing tomorrow morning. Sleep well. You're in excellent hands. S. Cartwright." I read it twice, then set my phone face down on the nightstand. They thought they were about to bury me in legal fees and family pressure. They thought I was unprepared, overwhelmed, alone. They thought wrong. I finished my wine, turned off the lights, and slept better than I had in 5 years. Because while they were scrambling to build a case, I was 3 steps ahead. And they had no idea what was coming. I grew up believing I was lucky. That's what my mother told me every time I questioned why things felt uneven, why Veronica got the bigger room, the nicer clothes, the family trips I was never invited on. "You're lucky to be part of this family, Natalie. Not everyone gets what you have." For years, I believed her. My father left when I was 4, before I have any real memories of him. It was always just me, Mom, and Veronica in the house on Pinewood Avenue. Veronica was 3 years older, and from the beginning, she was the sun around which everything revolved. She was charming, outgoing, the kind of child who could walk into a room and make adults smile. I was quiet, bookish, the kind of kid who preferred corners to center stage. When I was 7, Mom sat me down and explained that money was tight. That we all had to make sacrifices. That meant I'd wear hand-me-downs while Veronica got new school clothes. That meant I'd share a room with the storage boxes while Veronica got the one with the bay window. That meant when there was only enough for one of us to take piano lessons, it would be Veronica because she has natural talent, and we can't let that go to waste. I understood. Or at least, I tried to. Grandpa Sterling was different. He was my mom's father, a retired civil engineer who'd spent 40 years building bridges across the Midwest before settling in Ashmont with Grandma Rose. When Grandma died suddenly from a stroke when I was 14, something in Grandpa broke. He became quieter, more withdrawn, less interested in the family gatherings Mom tried to organize. But he never withdrew from me. I started visiting him on Sundays when I was 15, mostly because I wanted to escape the house, escape the constant comparisons to Veronica, escape the feeling that I was always apologizing for taking up space. Grandpa's house was peaceful. He didn't ask me to be anything other than present. We'd sit in his kitchen, and he'd tell me stories about building the Riverside Bridge or the time he miscalculated a load bearing and nearly got fired. "Mistakes don't define you, Natalie," he'd say. "How you fix them does." I kept visiting every Sunday, even after I graduated high school, even after I started working full-time as an administrative assistant at Brookfield Medical Center. While Veronica went to a private university on a partial scholarship that Grandpa helped fund, I went to Ashmont Community College at night and paid my own way. Mom said it didn't make sense for Grandpa to pay for both of us, and besides, Veronica was studying marketing and that required a good school. I was just doing general studies. I'd be fine anywhere. I told myself it was fine. That I didn't need the help. That being self-sufficient was its own reward. But deep down, I noticed. I always noticed. When Veronica graduated, Grandpa gave her $10,000 to start her life. When I graduated 2 years later with my associate degree, he gave me a handwritten card that said, "Proud of you, kiddo." No check inside. I smiled and thanked him anyway, because that's what I did. I was grateful for what I got. The real shift started 5 years ago, right after Veronica's boutique failed. She'd used Grandpa's gift and a business loan to open a high-end clothing store in the Riverside district called Vero's. It lasted 11 months. The rent was too high, her inventory too expensive, her business plan non-existent. When it went under, she owed $40,000 to various creditors, and Mom begged Grandpa to help. He refused. "She needs to learn," he'd told my mother over Sunday dinner, one of the rare occasions I was actually invited. "Failure is part of business. I'm not bailing her out." Mom was furious. She didn't speak to him for 3 months. Veronica cried and said he didn't love her anymore, that he'd changed, that he was being cruel. Uncle Gerald, who'd always been more interested in Grandpa's money than Grandpa himself, started making passive-aggressive comments about how some people forget where they came from. During those 3 months, I kept visiting Grandpa every Sunday. Not because I was trying to win favor. I just didn't want him to be alone. One afternoon, he asked me to help him clean out Grandma's closet. It had been 5 years since she'd passed, but he hadn't been able to touch her things. We spent hours folding clothes, packing boxes, and sharing stories. He cried twice. So did I. "You're a good kid, Natalie," he said as we taped up the last box. "You don't keep score." That's rare. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged him. After that, things changed. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Grandpa started asking my opinion on things, what I thought about downsizing his house, whether he should sell his old truck, if I thought he should take that trip to Montana he'd always talked about. I answered honestly. I never tried to steer him toward decisions that would benefit me. I just tried to help him figure out what he actually wanted. When he started having trouble with his medications, forgetting which pills to take when, I created a simple chart for him and called him every morning to make sure he'd taken them. When he needed rides to his cardiologist, I rearranged my work schedule. When he couldn't sleep and called me at 2 a.m. just to talk, I answered. I didn't do it for inheritance. I didn't even think about inheritance. I did it because he was my grandpa, and he was lonely, and I loved him. But my family saw it differently. 2 years ago, Mom accused me of hovering and trying to isolate Grandpa from the rest of the family. "You're always over there," she'd snapped during a rare dinner I'd been invited to. "It's like you're trying to manipulate him." "I'm helping him," I'd said quietly. "Right. Helping. Is that what we're calling it?" Veronica had laughed, that cruel little laugh she'd perfected in high school. "Come on, Nat. Everyone knows what you're doing. You're not subtle." I'd left that dinner early and didn't go back. The invitations stopped coming after that. Birthday parties, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all happened without me. At first, Mom would send a text the day after, "Sorry you couldn't make it." As if I'd been the one who chose not to come. Eventually, even those texts stopped. The only person who noticed I was missing was Grandpa. "Where's the rest of them?" he'd asked one Sunday when I showed up with groceries. "Busy, I guess." He'd looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Busy. Right." 3 months before he died, Grandpa's health declined sharply. The doctor said his heart was failing, that he had maybe 6 months, maybe less. He refused to go into a hospice facility. He wanted to stay in his house, in the bedroom he'd shared with Grandma, surrounded by his things. I took a leave of absence from work. I moved into his guest room. I cooked his meals, managed his medications, helped him bathe when he was too weak to do it himself. I read to him every night, usually old westerns he loved, sometimes just the newspaper. Mom visited twice. Veronica came once, stayed for 20 minutes, spent most of it on her phone. Uncle Gerald stopped by to ask if Grandpa had gotten his affairs in order, and left when Grandpa told him to get out. During those 3 months, Grandpa talked a lot. About Grandma, about his regrets, about the bridges he'd built and the ones he'd burned. One night, about 2 weeks before he died, he asked me to sit down. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice raspy and thin. "I've redone my will." "Grandpa, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." He held up a trembling hand. "Listen. I've left almost everything to you. The money, the investments, all of it. Your mother gets a piece of jewelry. Veronica gets some books. Gerald gets a watch. That's it." I stared at him. "Why?" "Because you're the only one who showed up." His eyes were clear, sharp, despite his failing body. "Not when it was convenient. Not when there was something to gain. You showed up because you loved me. That's rare, Natalie. That deserves to be recognized." "They're going to hate me," I whispered. "They already do, honey. They just haven't been honest about it yet." He reached for my hand. "I've made arrangements. My lawyer knows everything. There's another lawyer, Simone Cartwright. She'll help you when they fight this. And they will fight. I don't want to cause problems." "You're not causing anything." "I am. And I'm doing it because it's right." He squeezed my hand weakly. "Promise me you won't give it back. Promise me you won't let them guilt you into giving up what you've earned." "Earned?" "Grandpa, I didn't do this for money." "I know. That's exactly why you've earned it." I promised him. And 2 weeks later, he died peacefully in his sleep with me sitting beside him, holding his hand. The funeral was small. Mom cried loudly. Veronica gave a speech about what an amazing grandfather he was and how much she'd missed their special bond. Uncle Gerald looked bored. I said nothing. I just stood in the back and said goodbye silently. The reception was at Mom's house. I wasn't invited. "It's just for close family," Mom had said, not even looking at me when she said it. I'd gone home, sat in my apartment, and waited for the will reading. And when that day came, when Veronica shoved me toward the back of the room and hissed that I wasn't real family, I finally understood what Grandpa had seen years before I did. I was never going to be enough for them. Not because I wasn't good enough, but because they'd never wanted me to be. They'd wanted someone they could overlook, someone who stayed small and grateful and convenient. But Grandpa had seen something different. He'd seen someone worth fighting for. And now, with his legacy in my hands and their fury building like a storm, I was finally ready to stop apologizing for taking up space. I was ready to fight back. The first crack appeared 3 days after the will reading, but I'd been watching for it since the moment I left Mr. Pemberton's office. I was back at work at Brookfield Medical Center, sitting at my desk processing patient intake forms, when my supervisor Karen stopped by my cubicle. She had that uncomfortable look people get when they're about to deliver bad news they didn't create but have to share anyway. "Natalie, can we talk in my office for a minute?" I followed her down the hallway, my stomach tight but my face calm. Her office was small, cluttered with medical coding manuals and half-dead plants she always forgot to water. She closed the door and gestured for me to sit. "I got a strange call this morning," she began, fidgeting with a pen. "From someone claiming to be your mother." "What did she want?" Karen shifted uncomfortably. "She said you've been going through a family crisis. That you've been acting erratically and making poor decisions. She was concerned about your mental state and wanted to know if we'd noticed any changes in your behavior at work." The pen I'd been holding stopped moving. "What did you tell her?" I told her I couldn't discuss employee matters with unauthorized parties and ended the call. Karen leaned forward. "Natalie, is everything okay? Because if you're dealing with something, we have resources. The Employee Assistance Program can." "I'm fine," I said evenly. "My grandfather passed away recently and left me an inheritance. My family is upset about it. That's all this is." Karen's expression softened with relief. Oh. Okay. I just wanted to make sure. Your work has been excellent, as always. I haven't noticed any issues. Thank you for telling me about the call. I walked back to my desk, but I couldn't focus on the intake forms anymore. My mother was calling my workplace. Questioning my mental stability. Planting seeds of doubt with people who had power over my livelihood. It was strategic. It was calculated. And it was just the beginning. That evening, I got a call from my landlord, Mr. Pacheco. He'd owned the building for 20 years, and we'd always had a cordial relationship. I paid rent on time, kept the place clean, never caused problems. Natalie, I need to ask you something, he said, his voice careful. Have you been involved in any legal trouble recently? No. Why? Someone came by today asking questions about you. A woman said she was your sister. She wanted to know about your lease, how long you'd been here, if I'd had any problems with you. He paused. She also asked if you'd been acting strange lately, if I'd seen you with unusual people coming and going. My jaw tightened. What did you tell her? I told her I don't discuss my tenants with anyone and asked her to leave. But Natalie, what's going on? Family dispute over an inheritance. She's trying to build a case that I'm unstable. Mr. Pacheco sighed. People get ugly when money's involved. You need anything from me, a statement or something, you let me know. Thank you. I appreciate that. After we hung up, I made a list. My workplace. My landlord. Who else would they contact? My bank? My doctor? How far would they go? The answer came 2 days later when my coworker Jenna pulled me aside during lunch. Hey, so this is weird, but someone added me on Facebook yesterday. Veronica Calloway. Says she's your sister. My blood went cold. Did you accept? No, not yet. But she sent me a message. Jenna pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. Veronica Calloway, hi Jenna. I'm Natalie's sister. We're going through a tough family situation right now and I'm really worried about her. She hasn't been herself lately and I'm afraid she might be making some really bad decisions. Has she mentioned anything to you? I just want to make sure she's okay. I stared at the message, reading it 3 times. The tone was perfect, concerned but not accusatory, worried sister just looking out for family. To anyone who didn't know the truth, it would seem completely reasonable. She's been sending these to your friends? I asked quietly. I don't know. I'm the only one who's mentioned it so far, but... Jenna looked uncomfortable. Natalie, what's really going on? I could have lied. Could have downplayed it. Instead, I told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. My grandfather's will. The inheritance. The family coming after me. They're trying to make me look unstable so they can contest the will, I finished. They're building a narrative. Jenna's eyes widened. That's insane. That's family. I managed a bitter smile. Don't accept the request. Don't respond. And if anyone else asks about me, tell them nothing. She nodded. Of course. And Natalie? For what it's worth, you seem like the sanest person I know. That night, I called Simone Cartwright. She answered on the second ring, her voice crisp and professional. Ms. Calloway. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. They're contacting my workplace. My landlord. My coworkers. They're trying to make me look unstable. Expected. Classic undue influence strategy. They need to prove you manipulated your grandfather, which means they need to paint you as someone capable of manipulation. To do that, they'll try to establish a pattern of erratic or deceptive behavior. Can they do that? Legally? Contacting people and asking questions? Unfortunately, yes. As long as they're not making defamatory statements, they're within their rights to investigate. Simone's tone shifted slightly. However, we can make it much harder for them. I need you to do something for me. What? Document everything. Every contact they make with you, every message, every call. Screenshot the Facebook messages. Get statements from your landlord and supervisor about the inquiries. Create a timeline. We're going to show the court exactly what they're doing. You think it'll go to court? Ms. Calloway, they've already retained Harmon and Lyle. This is going to court. The question is whether we bury them quickly or whether they drag it out for months. The more evidence we have of their harassment campaign, the faster we end this. I spent the next hour typing up everything that had happened since the will reading. Every call, every voicemail, every attempt to contact people in my life. When I finished, the document was 6 pages long. The following week, things escalated. I arrived home from work to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart hammered as I pushed it open carefully, expecting to find someone inside, but the apartment was empty. Nothing seemed to be missing. But things had been moved. Subtle things. My mail had been rifled through and res-tacked differently. The drawer where I kept important documents was open a crack when I always kept it closed. Someone had been inside. I called the police. They came, took a report, dusted for prints, and found nothing useful. No signs of forced entry, which meant someone either had a key or knew how to pick a lock. The officer suggested I change my locks and install a security camera. I did both that night. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from Harmon and Lyle. It was thick, official, and full of legal language that basically said my family was formally contesting the will on the grounds of undue influence, lack of testamentary capacity, and fraud. They were requesting a full mental health evaluation of my grandfather's medical records, depositions from everyone who'd had contact with him in his final years, and a forensic accounting of any financial transactions between us. They were also requesting my financial records, my employment history, and my medical records. I forwarded everything to Simone. Her response came an hour later: they're fishing. Don't give them anything without a court order. We'll fight every request. That night, Veronica called from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. What do you want? Jesus, Natalie, you don't have to be so hostile. Her voice was different, softer, almost vulnerable. I just wanted to talk. Sister to sister. We're not sisters. You made that clear. That's not fair. I was upset. We all were. You have to understand, this came out of nowhere. Nobody expected Grandpa to leave everything to you. Nobody expected him to have the will to say no to you, you mean? She was quiet for a moment. This doesn't have to be a war. We can work something out. You don't need all that money, Natalie. You've never cared about money. Just give us what's fair and we can all move on. What's fair? I kept my voice neutral, curious. What would fair look like to you? Split it evenly. 4 ways. You, me, Mom, and Uncle Gerald. That's still over $1 million each. You'd still be set for life. And if I say no? Her voice hardened immediately, the vulnerability vanishing like it had never existed. Then this gets ugly. Really ugly. We have lawyers, Natalie. Good ones. We have evidence that you isolated Grandpa, that you manipulated him when he was vulnerable. We have witnesses who'll testify that he wasn't himself those last few months. Witnesses who barely visited him, you mean? It doesn't matter. What matters is what a judge believes. And when we're done, you won't just lose the inheritance. You'll lose your reputation. Everyone will know what you did. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. So talk to your sister didn't last very long. I tried to be reasonable. No, you tried to manipulate me the same way you've manipulated everyone your whole life. The difference is, it's not working anymore. I kept my voice calm, almost pleasant. See you in court, Veronica. I hung up before she could respond. Then I called Simone back and told her about the conversation. She laughed, actually laughed. Perfect. That's exactly what we need. They're panicking. When people panic, they make mistakes. They broke into my apartment. Can you prove it was them? No. Then we can't use it. But keep that camera running. If they try again, we'll have them. Over the next 3 weeks, the pressure intensified. Uncle Gerald showed up at my workplace, demanding to speak with me. Security escorted him out. My mother sent me a 7-page letter detailing everything she'd sacrificed for me growing up and how betrayed she felt. Veronica posted cryptic messages on social media about family betrayal and greed, never mentioning my name but making it obvious who she meant. Every night, I documented everything. Every incident, every message, every attempt to intimidate or manipulate me. And slowly, I began to see what they couldn't. They weren't building a case. They were building my defense. Every aggressive move, every attempt to paint me as unstable, every threat, it all showed the court exactly who they were. Desperate. Vindictive. Willing to destroy me to get what they wanted. Grandpa had been right. They were going to fight. They were going to make it ugly. But he'd also been right about something else. I was ready. And I wasn't backing down. The first official meeting with Simone Cartwright happened on a cold Wednesday morning at her firm's offices in the financial district of Ashmont. Brennan and Ford LLP occupied the entire 14th floor of the Sentinel Tower, all glass walls and polished marble, the kind of place that announced wealth and power before you even stepped inside. I'd dressed carefully that morning. Professional but not expensive. I wanted to look capable, not like someone flaunting newfound money. The receptionist directed me to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. Simone was younger than I'd expected, maybe early 40s, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and when she shook my hand, her grip was firm and assured. "Ms. Calloway. Please, sit." She gestured to a leather chair across from her desk, which was immaculately organized. Not a single stray paper. "I've reviewed everything you sent. The timeline, the documented contacts, the threatening messages. It's excellent work. Thank you. Your grandfather prepared me well for this. We met 4 times before he died, went over every possible angle they might use." She opened a thick folder. He was very thorough. Almost obsessively so. He knew them better than they knew themselves. Indeed. Simone pulled out several documents. "Let's talk strategy." Harmon and Lyle filed their petition last week. They're alleging 3 primary claims: undue influence, diminished capacity, and fraud. Let's break down each one and how we're going to dismantle them. She slid a document across the desk. It was the psychiatric evaluation Grandpa had undergone, dated 8 months before his death. Dr. Raymond Hirsch, one of the most respected geriatric psychiatrists in the state, evaluated your grandfather over 3 separate sessions. His conclusion: Sterling Calloway was of completely sound mind, showed no signs of dementia or cognitive decline, and demonstrated clear understanding of his assets and wishes. That destroys their capacity argument immediately. What about the undue influence? That's trickier. They'll argue you isolated him, that you were the only family member with access during his final months, that you manipulated his emotions to change the will in your favor. She leaned back. They need to prove you had the opportunity, the disposition, and that you actually exerted pressure. We're going to prove the opposite. Simone pulled out another folder, this one much thicker. Your grandfather kept meticulous records. Phone logs showing he called you, not the other way around. Calendar entries documenting family events you were deliberately excluded from. Email chains showing he reached out to your mother and sister repeatedly and was ignored. She tapped the folder. This shows a pattern. He didn't isolate himself. They abandoned him. I felt my throat tighten. Seeing it all documented like that, in black and white, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. There's more, Simone continued. Your grandfather recorded several conversations. What? With your mother, your sister, and your uncle. Nothing illegal, he was a party to the conversations, so single-party consent laws apply. But very revealing. She pulled out a small digital recorder. He wanted you to hear this one. It's from 18 months ago, 3 months after he refused to bail out Veronica's boutique. She pressed play. My mother's voice came through, tight with barely controlled anger. Dad, you're being completely unreasonable. She's your granddaughter. Family helps family. Grandpa's voice, weaker but firm. I helped her start the business. She made bad decisions. I'm not rewarding that. So you'd rather see her struggle? Watch her lose everything? I'd rather see her learn something. There was a pause, then Veronica's voice, sharp and entitled. This is about Natalie, isn't it? You like her better because she kisses up to you every Sunday. She's pathetic, Grandpa. She has no life, so she latches onto yours. My grandfather's response was cold. Natalie shows up because she cares, not because she wants something. Oh please, Veronica scoffed. She wants something. She's just smarter about hiding it. You'll see. The moment you're not useful anymore, she'll disappear too. Then I guess we'll find out, won't we? The recording ended. I sat there, staring at the recorder, my hands clenched in my lap. Hearing Veronica say those things, hearing the contempt in her voice, it shouldn't have surprised me. But it did. Or maybe it just hurt more hearing it confirmed. He recorded that conversation because he knew, Simone said quietly. He knew they'd eventually claim you manipulated him, so he documented their real feelings. Their real motivations. How many recordings are there? 17. All of them show the same pattern. Your family contacting him only when they needed money or wanted something. Getting angry when he said no. Dismissing you or speaking badly about you. She closed the folder. This is our nuclear option. If they push this to trial, if they try to destroy your character on the stand, we release these. Every single one. I took a shaky breath. What about the fraud claim? Baseless. They're alleging you forged his signature or somehow tricked him into signing documents he didn't understand. But we have Mr. Pemberton's testimony, Dr. Hirsch's evaluation, and video evidence. Video? Simone turned her laptop toward me and pressed play. The screen showed Grandpa sitting in Mr. Pemberton's office, looking directly at the camera. The timestamp read 14 months before his death. My name is Sterling James Calloway, he began, his voice clear and strong. I am of sound mind and body. I am recording this statement of my own free will, with no pressure or coercion from anyone. I am executing a new will today that leaves the majority of my estate to my granddaughter, Natalie Ruth Calloway. He paused, looking directly into the camera. I know my daughter Colleen, my granddaughter Veronica, and my brother Gerald will contest this decision. I know they'll claim I was confused or manipulated. I'm making this recording to state clearly, I am not confused. I have not been manipulated. I am making this choice because Natalie is the only member of my family who has treated me like a person rather than an ATM machine. His expression hardened. For the past 5 years, since my wife Rose died, Natalie has been the only one who consistently showed up. Not when it was convenient. Not when she wanted something. Every week, without fail. She helped me when I needed help. She listened when I needed to talk. She asked for nothing in return. My daughter calls me twice a year, on my birthday and Christmas, and spends both calls complaining about her life. My granddaughter Veronica calls only when she needs money. My brother Gerald hasn't visited in 3 years but sends me investment opportunities monthly. Natalie is the only one who loved me for me. That's why she gets everything. If they want to fight this, they can try. But they won't win. This is my decision. My money. My choice. The video ended. I realized I was crying. Silent tears running down my face that I wiped away quickly, embarrassed. Simone handed me a tissue. He knew exactly what he was doing. Every step. Every precaution. Your grandfather was a strategic thinker, and he spent months building an unbreakable case. Why didn't he tell me? Because he didn't want you carrying that weight while he was alive. He wanted you to just be his granddaughter, not his co-conspirator. She closed the laptop. But now that he's gone, you need to know what weapons we have. Because they're coming hard, and we need to be ready to hit back harder. Over the next hour, Simone walked me through the entire legal strategy. We'd respond to their petition with a motion to dismiss based on the overwhelming evidence of Grandpa's mental competency. We'd subpoena their financial records to show their desperation for money. We'd depose every witness they planned to call and expose their lack of relationship with Grandpa. Discovery is going to be brutal, Simone warned. They'll request your financial records, your communications, everything. We'll fight what we can, but some of it you'll have to turn over. I have nothing to hide. Good. Because they'll be looking for any transaction between you and your grandfather that could be framed as exploitation. Did he ever give you money? He paid for a car repair once. $400. That was 3 years ago. We'll document it. Anything else? Gifts? Loans? Nothing. He'd offer sometimes, but I always said no. Simone smiled for the first time that meeting. Perfect. That's going to infuriate them. They'll be expecting to find payments, transfers, something they can use. Finding nothing makes their case look desperate. She pulled out a calendar. Depositions start in 6 weeks. You'll be deposed first. It'll be long, probably 8 hours over 2 days. They'll ask you everything, try to trip you up, make you angry. Your job is to stay calm, answer honestly, and don't volunteer information. I can do that. I know you can. Your grandfather said you were stronger than you looked. She studied me for a moment. He also said you'd try to settle to avoid hurting your family. That you'd feel guilty for fighting back. I met her eyes. He was wrong. Good. Because guilt is a weapon, and they'll use it. Your mother will cry. Your sister will play victim. They'll remind you of every good thing they ever did for you, which I suspect is a very short list. Extremely short. Then remember this, you don't owe people love just because you share DNA. You don't owe them forgiveness just because they're family. And you definitely don't owe them money just because they think they deserve it. Simone stood, signaling the meeting was over. Your grandfather fought for you. Now we're going to finish what he started. I left that office feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, prepared. That evening, I did something I'd been putting off. I went through every photo album, every memory box, every keepsake from my childhood, looking for evidence of the family they claimed we were. The loving, supportive family they'd suddenly started talking about in their legal filings and Facebook posts. I found 23 photos of Veronica's birthday parties. Elaborate affairs with dozens of guests, expensive cakes, piles of presents. I found 4 photos of my birthdays. Small gatherings, simple cakes, noticeably fewer guests. I found programs from Veronica's dance recitals, her college graduation, her boutique's grand opening. I found nothing from my community college graduation because no one came. I found thank you cards Veronica had written to Grandpa over the years. Thanks for the money. You're the best. Love you, Grandpa. I found birthday cards I'd given him, filled with long notes about memories we'd shared, inside jokes, real affection. I scanned everything. Every photo, every card, every piece of paper that showed the truth of what our family actually was. Then I organized it all into a folder labeled Evidence, Family Dynamic. It wasn't about being vindictive. It was about being ready. Because Simone was right. They were going to play the family card hard. They were going to talk about bonds and love and loyalty. They were going to paint me as the villain who tore apart a loving family over money. And I was going to show the court exactly what kind of loving family excludes someone from every important moment, then acts shocked when that person stops participating in the lie. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Last chance. Settle this privately or we destroy you publicly. Your choice. I screenshot the text, forwarded it to Simone, then blocked the number. My choice had already been made. And I chose the truth. The day I removed myself from the equation entirely started with something small, something I'd been thinking about for weeks but hadn't had the courage to execute until now. I was sitting in my apartment on a Saturday morning, coffee cooling on the table beside me, staring at my laptop screen. On it was my bank account, the one that now held $4,900,000 minus estate taxes. The deposit had cleared 3 days ago. The number sat there, massive and surreal, more money than I'd ever imagined having. And I realized something, keeping it in an account they could monitor, that they could try to claim or freeze or argue over, that made me vulnerable. I called Simone. It's Saturday, she answered, but her voice was alert, not annoyed. I need to move the money. Protect it. What are my options? There was a pause, then I heard the sound of papers rustling. Smart. Very smart. They can't touch the funds directly, the will has been probated and the transfer was legal, but perception matters. If they can argue you're spending recklessly or hiding assets, it muddies the water. So what do I do? Irrevocable trust. We set it up with you as the beneficiary but managed by a trustee. The funds are protected, dispersed according to predetermined rules. It shows fiscal responsibility and removes their argument that you're not capable of managing the inheritance. How fast can we do it? I'll have the paperwork ready by Monday. We'll need a trustee you trust implicitly. Someone with no connection to your family. I thought for a moment. What about you? I can't, conflict of interest since I'm your attorney. But I have someone. Former federal judge, impeccable reputation, does estate management for high net worth individuals. His name is Lawrence Templeton. If you approve, I'll reach out. Do it. By Tuesday, the trust was established. The money moved from my personal account into the Callaway Family Trust, managed by Judge Templeton, dispersed to me in monthly installments with provisions for large purchases requiring trustee approval. It was conservative, responsible, and completely bulletproof. When Simone sent me the confirmation, she included a note, this just became exponentially harder for them to attack. Well done. But protecting the money was only the first step. The real move came 2 days later. I'd been thinking about what Grandpa had said in that video, about how my family only contacted him when they wanted something. About how none of them had actually taken care of him. And I realized that same pattern extended beyond just Grandpa. There were other people they'd used over the years. Other relationships they'd exploited. I started with Aunt Pamela, my mother's younger sister who I'd barely seen since I was a child. She'd moved to Oregon 15 years ago after a falling out with my mother over their parents' estate, Grandpa's parents, my great-grandparents. I found her number through an old address book I'd salvaged from Grandpa's house. She answered cautiously. Hello? Aunt Pamela? This is Natalie. Colleen's daughter. Long silence. Natalie. I heard about your grandfather. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. I know this is out of the blue, but I need to ask you something. What happened between you and my mom? The fight about your parents' estate? Another pause. Why are you asking? Because she's trying to contest Grandpa's will. She's claiming he wasn't mentally competent and that I manipulated him. I'm trying to understand if this is a pattern. Pamela laughed, but it was bitter. Oh, it's a pattern all right. When our parents died, your mother convinced them to change their will in her final weeks. Said she needed the money more because she was a single mother. I got $10,000 and a box of photos. She got the house, the savings, everything. When I questioned it, she cut me off completely. Said I was being greedy. Did you fight it? I thought about it. But I didn't have the money for lawyers, and honestly, I was exhausted from dealing with her. Your mother has a gift for making herself the victim while she's the one holding the knife. She paused. You're fighting back, aren't you? Yes. Good. Don't let her win. She's been doing this her whole life, using people and then playing wounded when they finally say no. Her voice softened. Your grandfather was a good man. If he left everything to you, he had his reasons. Don't let her take that from you. Would you be willing to testify? About what happened with your parents' estate? Absolutely. I got her written statement that week. It established a pattern, my mother manipulating elderly relatives, using sympathy and pressure to redirect inheritance, then cutting off anyone who questioned her. Next, I contacted Grandpa's former business partner, a man named Howard Shen who'd retired to Florida. He and Grandpa had built their engineering firm together 40 years ago before Howard bought out Grandpa's share when he retired. Howard, this is Natalie Calloway, Sterling's granddaughter. Natalie. How are you holding up, sweetheart? I'm managing. I need to ask you about something. Did my Uncle Gerald ever approach you about investing in any business ventures? Howard's tone changed immediately. 3 times. Each one was a disaster. He wanted me to go in on a real estate development scheme, lost $100,000 before I pulled out. Then it was some tech startup that never launched. The 3rd time, I just said no outright. Your grandfather warned me about him, said Gerald couldn't manage money if his life depended on it. Would you be willing to document that? For Sterling's granddaughter? Absolutely. That man was one of the best people I ever knew. If his family's giving you trouble, I'll help however I can. One by one, I contacted people my family had burned. Grandpa's former neighbors who my mother had borrowed money from and never repaid. Veronica's ex-business partner who'd been left holding the debt when the boutique collapsed. Uncle Gerald's former employer who'd had to fire him for falsifying expense reports. Each one had a story. Each one was willing to talk. By the end of 2 weeks, I had 17 witness statements, all establishing the same pattern. My family exploited people financially, manipulated situations for their own benefit, and cut ties with anyone who challenged them. Simone called it building the fortress. They want to paint you as the manipulative one, she said, reviewing the statements. We're going to show the court who the real manipulators are. This isn't just about defending you anymore. This is about exposing them. The depositions began in early November, cold gray days that matched the mood in the conference room at Harmon and Lyle's offices. I was deposed first. 2 full days of questions from their lead attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Patricia Oakes who looked like she enjoyed making people squirm. Ms. Calloway, how many times per week did you visit your grandfather in his final year? It varied. Usually 5 to 6 times per week. 7 when his health declined. And during these visits, did you discuss his will? No. Never. He mentioned it once, about 2 weeks before he died. I didn't ask him to. He brought it up himself. What exactly did he say? He told me he'd changed his will and left most of his estate to me. I told him he didn't need to tell me that. He said he wanted me to be prepared. Prepared for what? For this. For my family contesting it. Patricia's expression didn't change. You weren't surprised by the inheritance? I was shocked by the amount. But not shocked that he left me something, no. Because you'd been working toward this outcome? I met her eyes steadily. Because I loved him, and he knew that. Love doesn't work toward outcomes. It just shows up. She tried for 6 more hours to get me to say I'd manipulated him, pressured him, isolated him from family. Every question, I answered calmly and honestly. Yes, I was there frequently. No, I didn't prevent anyone else from visiting. Yes, I helped manage his medications. No, I didn't control his finances or make decisions for him. By the 2nd day, I could see her frustration building. She wasn't getting what she needed. Ms. Calloway, isn't it true that you deliberately excluded your family from your grandfather's care? No. You didn't tell them when his health declined? I told my mother. She said she'd visit when she had time. She came twice in 3 months. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she didn't care. I kept my voice level. I sent updates every week. Texts, emails, calls. Most went unanswered. The information was available. They chose not to engage with it. Patricia shuffled her papers. Let's talk about the night your grandfather died. You were alone with him? Yes. Convenient. Simone cut in sharply. Counselor, are you implying something? Because if you're suggesting my client had anything to do with Mr. Calloway's death, I'd like to hear you say it clearly. Patricia backed off. I'm simply noting that Miss Calloway was the only witness to his final hours. He died of congestive heart failure, I said quietly. It was expected. The hospice nurse had been there 6 hours earlier and said it would be soon. I called my mother and sister. Neither came. He died holding my hand while I read to him from his favorite book. If that's convenient, then I guess I'm guilty of being there when no one else would. The room went silent. After my deposition ended, we deposed Veronica. She showed up in a black dress that screamed, "Morning granddaughter, makeup perfect, tissues ready." Simone led the questioning. Miss Calloway, how often did you visit your grandfather in the year before his death? Veronica dabbed at her eyes. As often as I could. He was very important to me. How often is that? Once a week? Once a month? I don't remember exactly. Several times. Simone slid a document across the table. These are your grandfather's calendar entries for his final year. He documented every visitor. You appear 3 times. Once in February, once in July, and once in October, 3 days before he died. Does that refresh your memory? Veronica's face flushed. He must have forgotten to write down some visits. Your grandfather kept meticulous records his entire life. He was an engineer. Documentation was his profession. Simone pulled out another paper. These are phone records. You called him 4 times that year. Each call lasted less than 5 minutes. Would you like to explain how you maintained this close relationship you've described? We texted. Show me the texts. Veronica's attorney objected, claimed the request was overly broad. Simone withdrew it, but the point was made. Let's talk about your boutique, Simone continued. Vero's. It closed after 11 months, correct? Yes, the market wasn't right. Or the business plan wasn't viable. Your grandfather lent you $10,000 to start it, didn't he? It was a gift. According to this promissory note you signed, it was a loan. Simone slid it across. You still owe him that money. Well, you owe the estate. That's money you owe your sister now. Veronica's eyes went wide. That's not, he forgave that loan. Do you have documentation of that forgiveness? Silence. I'll take that as a no. Simone made a note. We'll be adding that to the estate's assets. $10,000 plus 8 years of interest comes to roughly $14,000. You can pay it in installments if needed. By the time Veronica left that room, she looked nothing like the composed mourner who'd walked in. She looked exactly like what she was, someone who'd been caught in a lie. We deposed my mother next. Then Uncle Gerald. Then every witness they'd planned to call. Each deposition revealed the same thing, they'd been absent. They'd been demanding. They'd treated Grandpa like an ATM and me like an inconvenience. By December, their case was falling apart. The hearing was scheduled for December 18th, 2 weeks before Christmas. Judge Andrea Whitmore presiding, courtroom 4C in the Ashmont County Courthouse. The room was smaller than I'd imagined from television, wood-paneled and formal, with rows of benches that reminded me of church pews. I arrived 30 minutes early with Simone. We'd gone over everything the night before, every possible question, every angle they might try. I wore a navy suit I'd bought specifically for this, professional but modest, nothing that screamed new money. My family arrived 10 minutes later. My mother walked in first, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral, her face carefully composed in an expression of dignified suffering. Veronica followed, also in black, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying, though I noticed her makeup was perfect. Uncle Gerald came last, wearing an ill-fitting suit and an expression of barely contained anger. They took seats on the opposite side of the courtroom. My mother glanced at me once, her face flickering with something, hurt maybe, or anger, or just performative sadness. I looked away. Patricia Oak sat at their table, organizing documents with the efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Next to her was another attorney I didn't recognize, probably brought in for additional support. Judge Whitmore entered at exactly 9 a.m. We all stood. She was a woman in her 60s with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd heard every possible variation of family drama and wasn't impressed by any of it. "Please be seated." Her voice was crisp, authoritative. "We're here today for the matter of Callaway Estate Contest, case number 2024, PR 8847. Petitioners are Colleen Callaway, Veronica Callaway, and Gerald Callaway, contesting the will of Sterling James Callaway on grounds of undue influence, diminished capacity, and fraud. Respondent is Natalie Ruth Callaway, primary beneficiary. Counselors, are we ready to proceed?" "Yes, Your Honor," Patricia said, standing. "Yes, Your Honor," Simone echoed. "Ms. Oakes, you may present your opening statement." Patricia stood, buttoning her jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. This case is about a vulnerable elderly man who was systematically isolated from his family and manipulated by his granddaughter during the final, weakest months of his life. Sterling Callaway was a man who built a successful career, raised a family, and maintained close relationships with his children and grandchildren for decades. But in his final years, after the death of his wife, he became increasingly dependent on Natalie Callaway. She gestured toward me without looking directly at me. The respondent positioned herself as his sole caregiver, his sole companion, his sole source of support. She gradually pushed other family members away, controlled access to him, and used her position of trust to manipulate his estate planning. What we'll show is that Sterling Callaway's final will, executed just 14 months before his death, was the result of undue influence by someone who exploited his grief and isolation. She sat down. It was smooth, practiced, exactly what I'd expected. Simone stood. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of undue influence. It's a case of disappointed expectations. The petitioners expected an inheritance they didn't earn. They expected rewards for a relationship that existed more in their imagination than in reality." She walked toward the center of the courtroom. "We will show, through extensive documentation, witness testimony, and Mr. Callaway's own words, that he was of completely sound mind when he executed his will. That he made his decision freely, deliberately, and with full understanding of exactly what he was doing and why. We'll show that Natalie Callaway didn't isolate him from his family. His family isolated themselves. They chose not to visit. They chose not to call. They chose not to be present unless they needed something." Simone paused, letting that sink in. This case is about a man who had the clarity to see who truly loved him and the courage to acknowledge it. The petitioners don't like his decision. But not liking something doesn't make it illegal. She sat down. Judge Whitmore looked at Patricia. "Call your first witness." Petitioners called Dr. Margaret Stiles. An older woman took the stand, someone I didn't recognize. She was sworn in, and Patricia began her questioning. "Dr. Stiles, what is your profession?" "I'm a geriatric neurologist specializing in dementia and cognitive decline." "Did you ever treat Sterling Callaway?" "No, I did not." "But you've reviewed his medical records?" "Yes, at the request of the petitioner's counsel." "And what was your assessment of Mr. Callaway's cognitive state in his final year?" Dr. Stiles opened a folder. "Based on the medical records, Mr. Callaway showed several indicators consistent with early cognitive decline. Memory issues, confusion about dates, difficulty managing complex tasks. These are all warning signs of potential diminished capacity." Patricia nodded. In your professional opinion, was Mr. Calloway capable of making complex financial and legal decisions in his final months? Based solely on these records, would have concerns about his capacity, yes. Thank you. No further questions. Simone stood. Dr. Stiles, you never met Sterling Calloway, correct? That's correct. Never examined him? Never spoke to him? Never observed him personally? No. So your entire opinion is based on reading medical notes written by other doctors? Yes, that's standard practice for expert review. Is it also standard practice to ignore psychiatric evaluations that directly contradict your assessment? Simone slid a document across. This is Dr. Raymond Hirsch's evaluation of Mr. Calloway, conducted 8 months before his death. 3 separate sessions, extensive cognitive testing. His conclusion, Mr. Calloway showed 0 signs of dementia or diminished capacity. Did you review this report? Dr. Stiles hesitated. I saw it referenced, yes. Did you read it thoroughly? I focused primarily on the medical records from his primary care physician. So you cherry-picked evidence that supported the conclusion you were hired to reach? Simone's voice was sharp but controlled. Dr. Hirsch is one of the most respected geriatric psychiatrists in this state. He actually examined Mr. Calloway. Why should this court trust your opinion over his? I'm simply pointing out inconsistencies. Inconsistencies that conveniently support your client's case. No further questions. Dr. Stiles stepped down, looking flustered. Patricia called 2 more witnesses, a neighbor who claimed Grandpa had seemed confused once when they spoke, and a former colleague who said he'd changed in his final years. Simone dismantled both testimonies quickly, establishing that neither had seen Grandpa regularly, neither had medical expertise, and both were basing their opinions on brief, casual interactions. Then Patricia called Veronica. My sister walked to the stand with her shoulders back, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue before she was even sworn in. She placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Patricia's question started gentle. How close were you with your grandfather? Very close. How often did you visit? As often as I could. Did you notice any changes in his final year? Yes, he seemed distant, not himself. Then came the attack. Miss Calloway, did your sister ever prevent you from seeing your grandfather? Veronica nodded, fresh tears appearing. Yes. She'd tell me he was too tired for visitors, or that he wasn't feeling well. She always had an excuse. Did this concern you? Very much. I felt like she was trying to keep him to herself. Did you confront her about this? I tried. She got defensive. Said I didn't understand what he needed, that I wasn't helping. It was like she wanted to be the only one in his life. Patricia nodded sympathetically. How did you feel when you learned about the will? Shocked. Devastated. Grandpa always told me I was his favorite. He said he'd make sure I was taken care of. To hear that he left me almost nothing. She broke down, actually sobbing. It just didn't make sense. Unless someone convinced him to change it. Thank you, Veronica. I know this is difficult. Simone stood slowly. She didn't speak right away, just looked at Veronica until the crying subsided and the courtroom was completely silent. Miss Calloway, you testified that you visited your grandfather as often as you could. Let's define that. Simone placed a document on the witness stand. This is your grandfather's calendar. He documented every visitor for the past 3 years. You appear 3 times in his final year. February 14th, July 22nd, and October 15th. 3 visits in 12 months. Is that as often as you could? Veronica glanced at the calendar. He must have missed some. He documented every meal, every appointment, every phone call. He was an engineer. Documentation was his life's work. Are you suggesting he systematically forgot to record only your visits? Maybe he didn't think they were important enough to write down. Or maybe they didn't happen. Simone pulled out another document. Let's talk about February 14th, Valentine's Day. You visited for 37 minutes. Your grandfather noted. Veronica stopped by, needed to borrow $500 for car repairs. Declined. July 22nd, Veronica visited, asked about loan for new apartment deposit. Declined. October 15th, Veronica came by, very upset, needed money for credit card debt. Declined. Notice a pattern? Veronica's face went red. He offered to help. He declined every request. That's not offering. Simone leaned forward. You testified that you were very close with your grandfather. When was his birthday? April something. April 7th. When was his wedding anniversary with your grandmother? I don't remember. June 3rd. They were married 42 years. What was his favorite book? I don't know these details. Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. He read it every year. Your sister knew that because she read it to him in his final weeks. Simone's voice hardened. You weren't close to your grandfather. You barely knew him. What you knew was that he had money, and you wanted access to it. That's not true. Veronica's voice rose. I loved him. Then why didn't you come when he was dying? Your sister called you. October 23rd, 8:47 p.m. She said he had hours, maybe less. You were 30 minutes away. Why didn't you come? Veronica opened her mouth, closed it. I had plans. I thought I'd have more time. What plans were more important than saying goodbye to the grandfather you loved so much? I don't remember. It was a difficult time. It was dinner with friends. We have your Instagram post from that night. You were at Marcello's Italian kitchen, celebrating a friend's birthday. Posted at 9:14 p.m. Your grandfather died at 10:52 p.m. Simone let that hang in the air. You chose breadsticks over goodbye. The courtroom was dead silent. Veronica's face crumpled, but this time the tears looked real, tears of shame and humiliation rather than performance. No further questions. Judge Whitmore called for a recess. I walked out into the hallway, my legs shaking despite how well it was going. Simone touched my arm. We're winning. Hold steady. When court resumed, Patricia called my mother. Colleen took the stand with the same dignified suffering she'd worn all morning. She testified about being a devoted daughter, about how painful it was to be excluded from her father's final months, about how she'd sensed something was wrong, but didn't know how to help. Then Simone stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Calloway, when was the last time you had a substantial conversation with your father before his death? My mother thought carefully. We spoke regularly. I didn't ask how often you spoke. I asked when you last had a substantial conversation. More than pleasantries. More than, how are you feeling? A real conversation. I'm not sure I can pinpoint. Let me help. Your father kept a journal. He documented conversations he valued. The last entry about you is from 3 years ago. May 12th. You'd called asking him to co-sign a loan for Veronica's boutique. He declined. You told him, and I quote, "You're being selfish and I don't know why I bother with you." Then you didn't speak to him for 4 months. Does that refresh your memory? My mother's face went pale. That's taken out of context. What context makes telling your elderly father you don't know why you bother with him acceptable? No answer. Mrs. Calloway, you received your mother's jewelry when she died, correct? Appraised at approximately $40,000? Yes. You sold most of it within 6 months. Why? I needed the money. Your father asked you to keep it in the family. His wife's jewelry. Your mother's jewelry. You sold it anyway. How did that conversation go? My mother's voice was barely a whisper. He was upset. He was devastated. He wrote in his journal, "Colleen sold Rose's jewelry without even asking me. Some things should matter more than money. I'm beginning to understand who my daughter really is." "Did you ever apologize?" It was mine to sell. "Legally, yes. Morally?" Simone paused. "Your father left you a brooch. One piece. The only piece of your mother's jewelry he'd personally kept. Why do you think he chose that?" "I don't know. Because he hoped you'd finally keep something that mattered." No further questions. By the time the testimonies ended, it was after 4 p.m. Judge Whitmore looked exhausted, and I felt hollowed out from watching my family expose themselves piece by piece. "I'll review all testimony and evidence," the judge said. "I'll issue my ruling within 30 days. Court is adjourned." We stood as she left. Across the courtroom, my mother was crying quietly. Veronica sat frozen, staring at nothing. Uncle Gerald just looked angry, though whether at me or at how badly the day had gone, I couldn't tell. Simone and I walked out together. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I just watched my family burn down." "They burned themselves down years ago," she said gently. "Today they just did it in public." I nodded, knowing she was right but feeling the weight of it anyway. 3 weeks later, 2 days before Christmas, Judge Whitmore's ruling arrived via certified mail. I opened it standing in my apartment, hands steady but heart pounding. After careful review of all evidence, testimony, and documentation, this court finds no merit to the claims of undue influence, diminished capacity, or fraud. Sterling James Calloway was demonstrably of sound mind when executing his will. The evidence shows he made informed, deliberate choices based on years of observation regarding his family relationships. The will stands as executed. Petition dismissed. Petitioners to pay court costs and respondents reasonable attorney fees. I read it 3 times. Then I called Simone. "We won," she said simply. "We won." I sat down on my couch and finally, for the first time since that day in the lawyer's office when Veronica shoved me aside, I cried. Not from sadness. Not from relief. From freedom. 6 months after Judge Whitmore's ruling, I stood in the living room of my new home overlooking Harborview Park, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and amber. The condo was modest by some standards, 2 bedrooms with floor-to-ceiling windows, but it was mine. Truly mine. No landlords, no cramped studios with thin walls, no compromises. I'd bought it outright, no mortgage, from the trust fund Judge Templeton managed. He'd approved the purchase after reviewing comparable properties and ensuring I wasn't being impulsive. I appreciated his caution. It kept me grounded when the enormity of what I had could have easily unmoored me. The spare bedroom had become my office. I'd left Brookfield Medical Center 3 months ago, not out of anger or celebration, but because I'd realized something important. I didn't want to process intake forms for the rest of my life. I wanted to do something that mattered. So I'd started small. The first call came from a woman named Teresa Wilmot. She'd found me through a support group for people dealing with contested estates. Her mother had died 6 months earlier, leaving everything to Teresa's brother despite the fact that Teresa had been the primary caregiver for 8 years. The brother had visited twice, both times to ask for money. "I don't even want the money," Teresa had told me during our first phone call, her voice shaking. "I just want people to know the truth. I want it documented somewhere that I was there. That I mattered." I helped her find an attorney. I helped her organize her documentation, all those receipts and calendar entries and medical records that told the story of who'd actually shown up. I helped her understand that wanting recognition wasn't greedy, it was human. Her case settled out of court. The brother agreed to a 60-40 split rather than face depositions that would expose his absence. Teresa cried when she called to tell me, not because of the money, but because someone had finally validated her experience. "You gave me permission to fight back," she'd said. "Thank you." After Teresa, there was Marcus, whose sister had drained their father's accounts before he died. Then Jennifer, whose husband's family tried to exclude her from his estate despite 20 years of marriage. Then Robert, whose brother forged their mother's signature on a new will 3 days before she passed. I didn't charge them. I wasn't a lawyer or a financial advisor. I was just someone who understood what it felt like to be erased by the people who were supposed to love you, and who'd learned how to fight back with documentation and truth. By month 4, I'd helped 11 people. By month 6, 23. That's when Simone called with a proposal. "You're doing estate advocacy work without realizing it," she said over lunch at a cafe downtown. "You're good at it. You're helping people who can't afford full legal representation navigate systems designed to intimidate them. Have you thought about making this official?" "Official how?" "A non-profit. Estate justice advocates, or something like that. You'd connect people with resources, help them document their cases, provide emotional support through the process. I'd volunteer legal guidance. We could partner with law schools for pro bono representation." I'd stirred my coffee, thinking. That sounds expensive to start. "You have the money." "I know, but you still feel guilty about having it." Simone had looked at me with that same sharp clarity she'd had in every courtroom appearance. "Natalie, your grandfather gave you that money to build something. Not to hoard it out of fear that using it makes you like them. Use it. Do something good." So I did. By August, Estate Justice Advocates was registered as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit. We had a small office in the Riverside district, nothing fancy, just 3 rooms with donated furniture and a coffee maker that worked half the time. Simone volunteered 10 hours a week. 2 law students from Ashmont University joined as interns. A retired social worker named Diana offered to handle intake calls. We helped people who were being written out of wills by manipulative family members. We helped caregivers who'd been promised compensation that never materialized. We helped adult children whose estranged parents suddenly reappeared when inheritance was on the table. We didn't always win. Sometimes the law sided with terrible people because they'd been technically legal in their terribleness. But we documented everything. We made sure people's stories were heard, recorded, validated. The local newspaper ran a feature about us in September. "Granddaughter turns personal tragedy into advocacy empire," the headline read. I hated the word empire. We were 4 people in a small office, but the article brought attention. Donations started coming in. Not huge amounts, $50 here, $100 there, from people who'd been through similar situations and wanted to help others. I used some of the trust fund to establish an endowment. Judge Templeton approved it after ensuring it was managed responsibly. The endowment would fund the nonprofit permanently, ensuring that even if donations dried up, we could keep operating. "Your grandfather would be proud," Judge Templeton had said when he signed off on it. "This is exactly what he hoped you'd do with his legacy." I'd never met Judge Templeton before he became my trustee, but he'd known Grandpa professionally for 20 years. They'd worked together on municipal infrastructure projects. "Sterling talked about you constantly those final years," he'd told me once. "How you showed up. How you asked for nothing. He said you were the only one who saw him as a person instead of a checkbook. He wanted to make sure you had the resources to keep being that kind of person for others." In October, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "From Veronica." I almost deleted it. My finger hovered over the trash icon for a full minute. But curiosity won. "Natalie, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I don't blame you. I've been in therapy for 6 months trying to understand why I did what I did. Why I treated you the way I did. My therapist says I need to take accountability, so that's what this is. An attempt. I was jealous of you. Not of the money, though that's what I told myself. I was jealous that Grandpa loved you in a way he never loved me. That you had something with him I could never access because I didn't know how to just be present without wanting something in return. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I did. I see who I was. I'm trying to be different, though I don't know if I'll succeed. I saw the article about your nonprofit. What you're doing is good. Really good. Maybe that's what Grandpa saw in you all along. That you could take pain and turn it into something that helps people. I hope you're happy. I mean that. V. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and didn't respond. Not out of cruelty, but because I didn't owe her absolution. Her growth was her own work to do, not mine to validate. Maybe someday we'd have a conversation. Maybe not. Either way, I'd be fine. In November, I went to Grandpa's grave for the first time since the funeral. I'd avoided it, not out of grief, but because I hadn't known what to say. Now, standing in front of the simple headstone that read, Sterling James Calloway, beloved husband, father, grandfather, I finally had words. I did it, I said quietly. I fought them, and I won. Not just the money, but the truth. Everyone knows now who showed up and who didn't. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, carrying the smell of autumn leaves and coming rain. I'm using what you gave me to help people like us. People who get erased. People who show up and get nothing in return. I knelt down, brushing fallen leaves off the headstone. You were right. About all of it. About them, about me, about what would happen. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I stayed for 20 minutes, just sitting there in the quiet, feeling closer to him than I had since he died. When I got back to my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Diana at the office. New intake call. Woman whose sister is trying to have her declared incompetent to steal her inheritance. She's crying. She needs help. Can you come in? I typed back, on my way. Because that's what I did now. I showed up. Not for money or recognition or gratitude, though sometimes those came. I showed up because someone needed help, and I had the resources and experience to provide it. I showed up because that's what Grandpa had taught me. That presence matters. That consistency matters. That love isn't something you perform when it's convenient, it's something you practice when it's hard. By December, 1 year after the will reading, estate justice advocates had helped 47 families. We'd secured 3 major legal victories, negotiated 12 settlements, and provided support and documentation for countless others still fighting. I celebrated the anniversary alone in my condo, a glass of wine and Grandpa's favorite book open on my lap. I'd started reading Lonesome Dove after he died, and I finally understood why he loved it. It was about loyalty and loss and people trying to do right by each other in a world that made that difficult. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Natalie Calloway? A young woman's voice, tentative. Yes. My name is Rebecca. I saw the article about your organization. I need help. My family is trying to contest my grandmother's will, and I don't know what to do. Everyone says I should just let them have it, that fighting will make things worse, but... Her voice broke. She left it to me because I was the only one who visited her. I was the only one who cared. And now they're saying I manipulated her, and I don't know how to prove that I just loved her. I closed my eyes, seeing myself in that lawyer's office 14 months ago, being shoved aside and told I wasn't real family. Rebecca, I said gently, I'm going to help you. Tell me everything from the beginning. And she did. As I listened, taking notes and asking questions, I realized something. I'd spent so much of my life feeling invisible, feeling like I didn't matter, that I was just the convenient one, the useful one, the one people only saw when they needed something. But Grandpa had seen something different. He'd seen someone worth investing in. Someone who could take pain and build something meaningful from it. Someone who understood that the greatest inheritance isn't money, it's the example of how to live with integrity. He'd given me the resources to fight back. And in fighting back, I'd found my purpose. Not revenge. Not proving them wrong. But helping others fight their own battles, validating their experiences, showing them they weren't crazy or selfish or wrong for wanting to be seen. 3 hours later, after I'd walked Rebecca through documenting her grandmother's care, connected her with Simone's office, and assured her that she wasn't alone in this, I hung up the phone. The city lights sparkled outside my window. My coffee had gone cold. My book sat unfinished on the couch. But I felt something I hadn't felt in years before Grandpa's death, certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be, doing exactly what I was meant to do. I raised my wine glass toward the window, toward the night sky, toward wherever Grandpa was. "Thank you," I whispered. "For everything." The next morning, I woke up early, made coffee, and went to the office. Diana was already there, sorting through intake forms. Simone arrived an hour later with case files. The law students showed up at 9, eager and optimistic and ready to learn. We had 6 active cases, 12 pending consultations, and a waiting list of people who needed help. I smiled. This was my inheritance. Not the money, though that made everything possible. My real inheritance was the knowledge that showing up matters. That presence is powerful. That love, real love, doesn't keep score or demand recognition. It just shows up. Consistently. Quietly. Without expectation of return. And in a world full of people who only appeared when it was convenient, being someone who showed up when it was hard, that was revolutionary. That was legacy. That was everything. My family had tried to erase me. They'd shoved me aside, called me manipulative, painted me as the villain. But in the end, I'd taken everything they'd meant for my destruction and turned it into my foundation. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their love or recognition or apology. I had something better. I had purpose, peace, and the absolute certainty that I was finally, completely, undeniably free. And that freedom? That was worth more than $4.9 million. That was priceless. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.